which is something distinctive to Muslim men. He has his head covered. So that's also something that's distinctive to Islamic practice.
Kind of a knitted thing, not necessarily fully Islamic. I think there's a kind of intentionality there. That's what's so powerful.
At the time, was his faith considered strange to people? How was Islam interpreted? Do we know at that time?
It depended on your level of education. It depended on your level of exposure.
But people knew that Yarrow was Muslim here?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Islam was a recognized religion. Educated Americans would have known that there were Muslims in West Africa. Probably also they were seeing Muslim activity in the United States.
Some of the enslaved people maintained practices that the enslavers noticed, right, made note of and watched.
Wearing skull caps and turbans and veils, celebrating Islamic holidays, refusing pork and alcohol.
Someone like Yarrow, he seems like an anomaly, but he's not that unusual insofar as being very religious and educated.
Peele's diary bears that out. Peele was a curious man, connected to the wider world. Yarrow's faith doesn't seem to surprise him. What really intrigues him is Yarrow's age.
Yarrow was supposedly 134 years old. Turns out he was sort of figuring his age by a different calendar.
Okay.
Yarrow was probably 83 in this picture. Peele was also older. He was in his late 70s, and he gave lectures in his museum about healthy lifestyle and how you would be able to reach an old age. Longevity was a theme. He had started painting older people in 1795, but there's more going on here. There's a looking that happens in this picture from the artist to the sitter. I think he really appreciated who Yarrow was, his sort of power that he had, which I think comes across in the portrait. There's an intensity there. I mean, if you look at it, it's a beautiful picture, but this is not just, a sheer, sketch of somebody. He's sort of drilling down into the person.
Charles Wilson Peele talked about why he thinks that Yarrow had this kind of longevity. And he said it's because he believes that he wasn't drinking alcohol, that he was praying a lot. Peele was thinking about Yarrow as a Muslim enslaved man, right? And not just a Muslim enslaved man, but a devout Muslim.
Peele only spent 2 days with Yarrow, but it clearly stayed with him. When Yarrow died in 1823, the papers published an obituary, which Peele is thought to have written. Died at Georgetown, Yarrow, aged, according to his account, 136 years. It is known to all who knew him he was industrious, honest, and moral. He was interred in the corner of his garden, the spot where he usually resorted to pray.
When Yarrow dies, there are multiple obituaries of this.
I counted so far 38 up and down the East Coast.
Wow. Of a man who was brought here as a slave.
Right.
Why was so much written about him, and why were there so many obituaries?
Well, he was 140 years old.
So they say.
So that's newsworthy.
Several years after Yarrow's death, his house was sold. His son Aquila appears in the 1830 census, living in Washington County, Maryland, about 45 miles northwest of Georgetown. Here, Aquila's wife worked as a midwife and was so popular, the community still bears the family name. But there's no evidence the family continued to practice Mamadou Yarrow's faith.
After 1865, churches from the north really descended on the south, and there was this Christianization of people. I think that for Muslims were still living at the time, and their children and grandchildren, there was probably more of an effort to be integrated and be like everybody else.
I would see this period as a deep tragedy to enslaved Africans. Enslavers who were writing history thought these people are without intelligence, without a soul. The assumption is that when they came, their gods died. And then they embraced Christianity. They did not acknowledge, or did not name those traditions and those practices. And so we've spent the last, say, 50 years trying to undo that kind of historical undertaking and to really figure out who exactly were these people, because they were there, but we never really studied them or their writings or their traditions.
In 2015, the rediscovery of Yarrow's story led archaeologists to Georgetown to excavate the site of Yarrow's house on Dead Place, following the lead in his obituary that he was buried in his backyard.
His home wasn't on the site. There was an 1850s house that stood on the site that was destroyed by a hurricane. When we started the project in 2015, it was an empty lot with an extant in-ground pool.
Significant redevelopment had removed most traces from Yarrow's time. There was no sign of Yarrow and little evidence of his life. Still, the dig created a unique opportunity. A chance to give Yarrow the Muslim funeral rites, the janazah prayer, unlikely to have received 200 years earlier.
In 2015, the Imam of Masjid Muhammad in Washington, D.C., he led the janazah prayer for Yarrow in that same spot of the yard. And Masjid Muhammad is historically predominantly Black masjid, one of the oldest in Washington, D.C. So it's pretty profound that all these years later, that has some meaning even to the people there.
And you led the prayers?
Yes, I led the prayer, and that was an honor for me. We did the janazah on the land, on his residence. We know it doesn't serve the official, but as a ceremonial to him, it would probably reach his soul.
It was a beautiful event and a way to honor Yarrow and to shed light on Muslims, their history, and their history in America.
We inherit his hopes, we inherit his dreams, and that's the connection that we feel for him. And this is the beauty of really what it means to be in America, really to embrace the excellence of the life that was here and that is here, and that shows who we are.
Today, on Dead Place, a new house stands on the spot where Mamadou Yarrow once lived. But his presence is commemorated with a plaque. It's a powerful reminder of Yarrow and the tens of thousands of other Muslims already here at the nation's founding. A people whose history is still being written, whose stories are still coming to light.
Oh, I didn't get to finish it. But anyways, this will be off the Virginia 1661 New History that's coming in with the new Bible Truth books, New Americas Now, all of that. Everything's going to link in together, and you're going to find that everything is already going to be written and meeting every specification since day one.